Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery. In this bin, one of my viewers, you know who you are. The last time we checked in here, they referred to this as the Taco Bell bin. Because yeah, that's a bag from Taco Bell. You can see there's the bell right there. This is the system I want to check in on today. The last time we checked in on this, we gave it its final feeding 10 days ago. And the whole idea was to send it into the foraging phase. And we even made one mention last time we checked in here 10 days ago, how when it comes time to harvest the castings and haul the worms out of that system, that we might be doing so in conjunction with these two other bins that are right here on top. And I actually checked in on these two systems yesterday to see how they're tracking towards that possible point in time when we might be able to collect up the castings, get the worms out of there. And it just seemed fair to also do the same in here. So we're going to get this system up on the bench. As you can see, we've got these things sort of uncovered to certain degrees to allow for a little bit of drying. I don't think we're going to need to do that here. From what I remember, the system was just about the right moisture content. I don't know, we'll have to take a look when we get in there. So I'm going to put on a glove, we're going to get this up on the bench, and we're going to get started. Oh boy, emergency vehicles. In most of my bins, I've been feeding right down the middle, and to indicate where I feed, I usually put down a coffee filter. So I think we'll see that here momentarily. I'm even seeing some worms gathering on this plastic covering. I always presume the reason they're interested in being on the plastic is because any moisture that would otherwise try to escape and leave the system gets caught on the plastic, condenses there, then eventually drops down, and then right beneath it as well is usually a pretty popular spot for the worms to hang out on too. So back to feeding patterns. Here we can see from this feeding zone indicator how we'd been feeding down the center, and on those other two systems you notice how the plastic covering was off on the edge of the bin, because in those systems we were doing a sort of continuous flow, sort of a wedge pattern to the feedings. And here, oh boy, I hear emergency vehicles coming again. So here, here we're kind of following suit with what you see in most of my bins. That pattern of sort of the wedge pattern or continuous flow, feeding off on one side, that was just sort of done as a little test only in those two bins. Pretty much everywhere else in my other systems we're running things kind of the way you see them in here, where the feedings generally get placed down the middle. But I guess the one slight advantage to the way those other two systems were set up is that, you know, with the feedings all being applied to one side in those bins, the opposite side really had a chance to dry out a lot. And by having a good amount of dry material, I was able to dump it into the more damp stuff that I had in those bins, and I think that might have been a good idea. I guess we'll see next time we come in there. And hopefully that'll help stabilize what appeared to me last time, yesterday, to be a couple bins that probably had a little bit more moisture in them than is necessary. Here, I guess if we really needed some dry material to compensate for perhaps some overly damp stuff, we can always grab a little bit from this outer edge, which wasn't thoroughly covered with plastic. But as I recall, we don't have anything like that going on here. I think the material everywhere in this bin is really flaky and loose, not clumping up or muddy. So I really don't think we have too much to do in here, other than just confirm that we're on track. I suppose if we really wanted to, if we felt that there might be an advantage to allowing the system to dry a little bit more, we could probably return that plastic covering that was on here in such a way that it would allow for a little bit more drying. But I think this stuff, just the way it is, would, you know, work really well if I wanted to, for example, light separate the worms out of their castings, which is just to, you know, shine bright lights down onto the bin. Oh boy, more emergency vehicles. You know, drive the worms down and then eventually scrape the, you know, material off the top surface. Then we could, you know, have the worms out of their material pretty quick. If if I were to do all 3 bins the same day, it would only, it would only take a couple hours, I think, to have all the worms out of all 3 bins all set to go for whatever I decide to do with them. The other option would be to just set up migration zones and try to convince the worms to exit their finished castings, which wouldn't be too difficult either, I believe, since the castings are pretty much devoid of any bedding or food or anything anymore. The foods that they got last time in here, from what I remember, there was lettuce and tomato, cucumber, a number of things that I had used to build a salad. And after 10 days, it seems unlikely that we'll see much, if any, leftovers. So let's take a peek down into the middle of the bin where that last feeding was applied. That might also be where we encounter a little bit of a worm party going on, if there is still any leftovers. Yeah, this material, it's all so nice. Even, even where the feedings have been getting applied down the middle, where you would expect a little bit more dampness to be present. Even here I can tell that the material is just as loose and flaky as it is anywhere else. Perhaps a little bit more damp. So here's a banana stem. Not too surprising to find a banana stem as leftovers. They do take a little bit longer than the peel, or longer than just the juicy part of the banana itself. So let's see here. Yeah, this is definitely where the worms are all hanging out, right down where the food was applied. But food I don't see. Looks like they gobbled it all up. I mean, the lettuce, there was the butt end or the stem end of a few heads of lettuce. There was some just lettuce leaves. The cuttings from a couple tomatoes, the end of a cucumber. All of that stuff, every bit of it would have been the sort of foods that you really don't find leftovers of in general. As far as harvest readiness, if you want to call it that, I would almost say that this bin is there. It almost seems like if we wanted to, we could just go right to town on, starting to give the worms a chance to dive down, scraping off their castings, collecting it up, maybe screening it a little bit, collecting up any debris that might still be floating within it, and then eventually having just a pile of worms after you've scraped all the castings off the top surface. But I don't know. I didn't really come down here prepared to do any of that stuff, and if I were to do that, I wouldn't even really have a place to put the worms. I guess I would. I do have a bin that I built maybe over a month ago now. It's just sitting here on the side, becoming nice and cozy and primed and ready for worms to be moved into eventually, someday. But when it comes time to harvest these 3 systems, I kind of had an idea once I gathered up all the worms. I did really like the idea of pulling all the worms out of all 3 systems, and then, I don't know. I'm still up in the air, so I don't want to kind of pigeonhole myself into any course of action here by mentioning what my idea is. So, I don't know. We'll have to see how my thought process and my motivation evolves. But I've got some ideas, and it just seems like what I would like to do might be easier or better if I were to kind of end all 3 systems at once and pull all the worms together. And I think we'd have quite a number of worms. This bin alone, I bet you, has a good couple thousand worms in it. Not to mention the other 2 bins. So, yeah, I think this bin's in really terrific shape. It's like in perfect condition, basically. The worms really have nothing to eat other than just leftovers that I've been sort of collecting up over here. Leftover bits of bedding, leftover bits of small scraps of food, some of the banana stems or whatever. But certainly not a lot. So the foraging here will just continue as it's been going on for the past 10 days. Although right after the final feeding, I don't know if I really consider that foraging yet. They're still just sort of, working down their last meal. And when that's really, for the most part, gone, then it's really kind of foraging, where they're more focused on kind of picking off the little scraps of leftovers that linger within the bin. And, if I did end up kind of light harvesting it, what I'll normally do in that case is I'll scoop the material out and run it through my screen, and then all these little bits of stuff that still remain behind would all get caught and get separated from the castings that way. I don't know, we'll see. We shall play it by ear. So yeah, very nice bin. Fun bin to check in on. You know, for the entire time this bin's in service down here in my wormery for the past 310 days, I've kept on continuously referring to these as the worms that were recruited out of the compost barrel that required repair. And when I bought the material in from the compost barrel, I originally thought about bringing these worms back outside and returning them to the compost barrel, but eventually just decided to keep them in here. And they're a lively bunch, and they're really productive, and they do a great job. But I do believe we're kind of at the end of the road in this system, and I believe that we'll be able to get them started in a nice new environment soon. I don't know, this seems to me like plastic somehow got into my shredder maybe, and yeah, it's not tearing. Every now and then I see some of this blue stuff. I don't know what it is, but I guess I should start picking it out. I've been sort of ignoring it, but it does seem to be a non-compostable material. All right, let's bring back our feeding zone indicator, even though there's no feedings happening here anymore. In fact, this piece of paper might just end up becoming their final meal, because you know, they're going to treat this as everyday food too, paper. Although, I don't know, the castings themselves are usually another potential source of food for worms, because the foods that they eat come out the backside so quickly that their castings are usually left with a good deal of residual nutritional value, which means they can just keep re-eating their castings over and over if they had to. So, must be interesting being a worm and being able to choose your diet that way. So, we did end up blending in a little bit of dry material from the outer edge, which I believe in general will bring the overall dampness of the material in the bin down a little bit drier. But I don't even think that's so important, because this stuff does seem like if it had to be, you know, sifted, it could very well be done easily. And, well, I don't know. We'll just see when the time comes to really make the call on how we're going to harvest these systems. So we're done here checking in on these worms. 310-day-old system, doing really good. And probably soon to be harvested as well. All right, everyone, I got a few things I got to take care of getting cleaned up and put away, but I'm not going to waste your time with that. That stuff's boring. Before I go there really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.